Hi, I wanted to share a really awesome opportunity that I had in high school, which was to lobby on Capitol Hill for environmental protections regarding climate change. I know that as a student and a young person, it can be really daunting to want to get involved with these causes, especially if you feel that some adults may not respect your opinion as much. So in this video, I hope to show you some ways that you can get involved and maybe even go to DC. I'll also talk a bit about my own personal experience with volunteering and lobbying. I know that in the hype of college admissions, many students are unfortunately led to believe that extracurriculars that they enjoy aren't necessarily good ones, but that's not the case. You can turn something you love and something that you're doing good with into an extracurricular. But even if you're not looking to, I hope this video can help. Somebody's watching me record. First, I just want to remind everyone that your voice is important. I know that it's really easy to discourage yourself by thinking things like, I'm not old enough, I'm not famous, anything like that. But you don't necessarily need any of those things. You still have a voice. I also want to point out that young people today are 40% of the population, but we are 100% of the future, which is something that should be inspiring and kind of force politicians to listen to us. At least I hope it does. And the other thing is that politicians and people who are working in offices that you're going to want to try to convince to change their policies are usually working with paid lobbyists all day who they're just paid to go there, to give them fancy meals, to do things like that, but they don't actually care about what they're advocating for. When young people and other people are advocating to protect the environment, it's because it's our future and we care. These representatives are supposed to represent us. I think it's our strength that we're willing to do these things, that we're willing to take time out of our lives to protest, to stand up to what's going on right now. So now I'm going to go over a bunch of different ways that you can get involved with climate activism. It's really important to find the ones that you think will work for you and your schedule. So first, you can write to your elected representatives via Twitter, email, or other social media. I would recommend using email. You can find their email by just searching their name and going to the contact section of their website. You may be thinking, well, what impact could an email have? But I've spoken to congressional staffers who've said that a few personalized emails can seriously throw their office off balance because they're tasked with responding to the concerns of the people that this person is supposed to represent. So they really do want to get back to every single person's email. And when it's personalized, you're showing that this is an issue that you care about so much that you're willing to take time out of your day to talk about it with them. And that's a scary thing to do. So it just goes to show that, first of all, other people in the district may care about it, and that your vote is probably going to be heavily influenced by that politician's stance on that issue. Similar to writing an email, you can also call the office of your elected representative. This contact information can usually be found in the same way as their email. It can be scary to call people on the phone, but most of the time you'll be calling the local office, so the people working there are part of the community that you're in. And their only job really is to respond to your concerns and to listen to you. So the people that pick up tend to be very, very kind. They're not going to argue with you. I mean, I really hope not. They're just going to listen. I've done this a few times, and it's been a really positive experience. The people I've spoken to on the phone, on both sides, Republican and Democrat, were both really nice, and they just wanted to hear my concerns. I actually received a follow-up letter in the mail on fancy paper from the office of Representative Chris Smith, who's a Republican who represents my district. And he responded to what I asked about in the phone call, which I know that it is a letter that they sent out to everyone who called or wrote about that, but it's still really cool to receive that and to know that they record everything. They will record every time you email them, every time you call them. You can also write letters to your local newspaper or even national newspapers. Usually the national newspapers will hold essay competitions, especially for students. And there are a few that are about climate change. I've personally written for one by The Economist called the Open Futures Essay Challenge, but there's a whole bunch on the internet. Unfortunately, those tend to be very competitive, so you may not necessarily get your piece published, which is why I recommend writing a letter to the editor, which there's plenty of guides on Google how to do this, so I won't really go over it, but it's writing a short, usually like 2-paragraph letter to your local newspaper to have them publish it about your opinion on a certain issue. This can help increase public awareness or public support for whatever you care about. And also when you write or call your elected representative, you can say, hey, we've had op-eds published in the newspaper about this issue. People in the community care about it. And they also themselves usually read those local newspapers. So you're sending a signal that way as well. The last two kind of personal things you can do before we get into the kind of community as a whole things is you can speak up and express concern in your daily life. I personally have used speech and debate as an outlet as well to express my concern for the environment. I had a speech about sustainability. There's so many different outlets, and I hope that you can find some in your own life that are really easy ways for you to spread awareness. And then finally, you can try to minimize your personal environmental impact. If you're looking to engage with the community on climate, I would recommend going or volunteering at public environmental events. These may include Earth Day events, local gatherings of people who care about the climate, or even non-climate affiliated events where you can go around and ask people to sign a petition that you can send to your elected representative next time you send an email or call them. Similar to that, you can attend a climate or environmental strike, which I think a lot of people have heard about at this point, and that's really great. So I won't go over it much, but I did leave some websites that you can check out to find environmental strikes in your area. You can also advocate in your school. There's a lot of ways that you can do this, like starting an environmental club at your school, bringing in speakers about the environment, or even petitioning your school to take a better stance on things like recycling or making sure all the lights are off in the building once everybody is gone. Finally, if you're looking to turn climate activism into a long-term activity of yours, I would suggest volunteering with an environmental organization. There's many of these, which is great, and you should find the one that fits you best or the one that's in your local area. I've listed a few on the screen. Most of these are more youth-led movements, with the exception of maybe Sierra Club and Citizens Climate. But Citizens Climate is actually the organization that I volunteered with and went to DC with, and they are really trying to reach out to younger people. I want to share a bit about my experiences with Citizens Climate because it's an organization that I really connected with, and maybe you'll feel the same way and look into joining as well. Citizens Climate's mission is to build political will for a livable world, which I really like that mission statement because it includes everybody. Citizens Climate is a nonpartisan organization that works internationally and has a presence in many countries around the world. They really believe that the only way that we are going to have a lasting climate solution is if we bring people together, especially in the United States, where our climate solution may not last more than 4 or 8 years, depending on congressional terms. So we really need legislation that both sides can agree on, at least right now, because we need to do something. So when I first joined CCL, I literally had no idea what to expect. I almost didn't even show up to the first meeting after I signed up online, but I did, since one of the local volunteers called me and she asked me how I heard about them, why I wanted to get involved, what I cared about, things like that. And then she asked me how old I was. And usually that question scares me when I'm trying to volunteer because a lot of places might say, oh, you're too young or something like that. So I was 16 at the time, and that's what I told her. And she was so excited. She wanted me to be a part of what they were doing. And the fact that I was young literally made no impact on that. They want everybody involved. So she invited me to a get-together that they were having, which wasn't even a meeting. It was more of like a little party in one of the members' backyards. So I showed up not knowing anybody there, and I opened the gate to the back. I was pretty surprised because I expected mostly younger people, just because I've always pictured the environmental movement as led by younger people. But it was great to see that so many people from all different ages cared about the environment and were doing something about it. Everyone there literally went out of their way to make me feel welcome. And at the end, they even gave us all a house tour in one of the local volunteers' new homes, which just goes to show you how much they trust one another and how much of a community there is. I think that's another thing that's really unique about CCL, is that they trust their volunteers. They trust them to write letters to the editor. They trust them to lobby on Capitol Hill for them. There's no person hired by CCL in that room who's there to watch over what you say. No, you're the person, you are the citizen expressing your concern in the environment. And that's what they want. They're not there to tell you what you can and cannot do to advocate in your community. They know that you know your community best, and they trust you to do that. And that's something that I've found so unique, because many organizations will try to tell you you can only do this or that. But CCL wants people to use their own abilities and their own creativity to find ways to increase public support for their legislation and for the environment. Finally, CCL is very solution-focused on getting a piece of legislation called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act to pass in Congress. Essentially, this act puts a price on carbon and other emission sources that increases over time, allowing the market to adapt and encouraging companies to finally make the cost-competitive switch to alternative and sustainable means of production. The fee that is collected on these emission sources will be given directly back to the American people. This is our primary focus because we view it as the single most effective piece of legislation in mitigating future climate change. And over 3,500 leading United States economists agree. They signed a statement called the Economist Statement on Carbon Dividends, saying that carbon fee and dividend is a policy that will be the single most effective thing that we can do. This is the bill that I lobbied in DC for. So I actually met with the legislative directors, or the top level staff, under Representative Chris Smith, Representative Norcross, and Representative Massey. I was invited inside the congressional office building, which was a really awesome experience. And I got to see the actual offices of these congresspeople and their staff. Each of the 3 meetings lasted around 30 minutes. It was really empowering to know that I was speaking directly to people who have a huge influence over what this representative is going to vote on. And sometimes the representative themselves will actually come to our meetings. So I hope that maybe you can find a way to turn things you care about into a long-term activity of yours that can even help your resume, but also make the world a better place. There's ducks. Okay, just wanted to show that.